In the 18th year of the Genroku era, when cherry blossoms painted the streets of Edo in delicate pink hues and the great city hummed with unprecedented prosperity, a young man named Kenji Matsudaira stood before the ornate sliding doors of his ancestral home for what he believed would be the last time. The year was 1705, and Edo had transformed into the world's largest city, its million inhabitants living under the watchful eye of the Tokugawa shogunate. Within this sprawling metropolis of merchants, artisans, samurai, and dreamers, our story unfolds. A tale that would challenge the very foundations of honor, duty, and love that governed Japanese society during one of its most culturally significant periods. This is not merely a story of personal betrayal, but a window into the complex social hierarchies, the unforgiving codes of Bushido, and the transformative power of forbidden love that defined the lives of those who lived under the shadow of Edo Castle. Prepare to journey into a world where a single word from a family patriarch could determine destiny, where honor was more precious than life itself, and where the heart's desires often collided with the immutable laws of social order. The Matsudaira compound stood like a fortress of tradition in the prestigious daimyo district, its towering wooden gates bearing the family crest, a stylized crane soaring above 3 mountain peaks. For 8 generations, the Matsudaira had served the Tokugawa with unwavering loyalty. Their wealth accumulated through strategic marriages, shrewd investments in rice futures, and an uncanny ability to navigate the treacherous waters of Edo period politics. Kenji's grandmother, Matsudaira Toshiko, was a woman of formidable presence and calculating intelligence. At 73, she possessed the sharp mind that had guided the family through the turbulent transition from the Sengoku period's chaos to the Pax Tokugawa. Her wrinkled hands, adorned with jade rings passed down through generations, had signed contracts that made the Matsudaira one of the wealthiest merchant families in all of Japan, their fortune rivaling that of some daimyo lords. The compound itself was a testament to their prosperity. Sprawling across nearly 3 acres, it housed not only the main family residence, a masterpiece of traditional architecture with its sweeping curved roofs and meticulously maintained gardens, but also separate quarters for servants, storage houses for rice and silk, and a private tea house where Toshiko conducted her most sensitive business negotiations. Kenji had grown up within these walls, his world bounded by carefully manicured landscapes where every stone had meaning, every tree held ancestral significance. His parents had died when he was merely 7 years old, victims of a cholera outbreak that swept through Edo like an invisible demon, claiming lives regardless of social status or wealth. From that moment, Toshiko had become his universe, demanding, nurturing, and utterly controlling. She had personally overseen his education, ensuring he mastered not only the classical Chinese texts that formed the foundation of samurai education, but also the intricate world of commerce that sustained their family's power. Under her tutelage, Kenji learned to read the subtle language of business negotiations, to understand the delicate balance between the merchant class's growing economic power and their officially low social status in the rigid Confucian hierarchy. He studied calligraphy until his brushstrokes were poetry in motion, practiced the way of tea until every gesture embodied centuries of aesthetic refinement, and trained in kendo until he could move with the fluid grace of a master swordsman. But as Kenji approached his 20th year, subtle tensions began to surface within the household. Toshiko, who had always shared her business insights freely with her grandson, began conducting certain meetings in private. Servants who had known him since childhood started avoiding his gaze. Most troubling of all, his grandmother began speaking frequently of marriage arrangements, not for him, but mysteriously referring to securing the family line through proper channels. The first indication that something was fundamentally wrong came during the Festival of the Dead, when families honored their ancestors and renewed their spiritual connections to the past. As Kenji knelt before the family altar, offering incense to his parents' memory tablets, he noticed that his own childhood portrait, traditionally displayed alongside other family members, had been quietly removed. When he asked Toshiko about this seemingly small oversight, her response chilled him to the bone. Some traditions must evolve with changing circumstances, Kenji-kun. Not all who grow up in this house are destined to be remembered within it. The revelation came on a crisp autumn morning, when the maple leaves in the garden blazed like scattered embers against the gray sky. Kenji had risen early to practice his calligraphy, finding solace in the meditative rhythm of brush against rice paper, when he overheard a conversation that would shatter his understanding of his entire existence. Through the thin paper walls of the reception room, he heard his grandmother's voice, cold and clinical, discussing arrangements with Yoshida-san, the family's chief retainer and most trusted advisor. "The boy has served his purpose," Toshiko was saying, her tone devoid of any warmth. "He has been useful for appearances, and his presence has provided protection for certain arrangements. But now that our true heir has reached maturity, maintaining the fiction becomes a liability." Kenji's hand trembled, causing ink to blot across the poem he had been transcribing, a classical verse about the impermanence of all things. The irony was not lost on him. What of his feelings for the young lady? Their attachment has grown quite strong, and she believes— "What she believes is irrelevant," Toshiko interrupted sharply. "Yuki-san understands her duty to this family. The engagement to our true heir will proceed as planned. As for Kenji, he will be provided for, generously, but distantly. There are business opportunities in Osaka that would suit his circumstances." That evening, when the household had settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Kenji confronted his grandmother in her private study. The room, lined with ancient scrolls and account books, smelled of sandalwood and secrets. Toshiko sat behind her low desk, working by the flickering light of an oil lamp, her aged face a mask of concentration. "Grandmother," Kenji began, his voice steady despite the storm raging in his heart, "I must know the truth about my parentage." Toshiko didn't look up from her papers. "The truth is a luxury that men in your position cannot afford, Kenji-kun." "My position?" The words escaped him with more force than he intended. "What exactly is my position in this household?" Finally, she raised her eyes to meet his. In that gaze, he saw not the loving grandmother who had raised him, but the calculating merchant who had built an empire through careful manipulation of truth and circumstance. "You are the child of my daughter's indiscretion," she said with devastating simplicity. "Your father was not the samurai she claimed to have married, but a ronin of questionable lineage who seduced her during her youth. When she died, I chose to raise you as my own, allowing you to believe in a heritage that was never truly yours." The revelation hit Kenji like a physical blow. Everything he had understood about himself, his place in the family, his future, his very identity crumbled in an instant. The child you believe to be your cousin," Toshiko continued relentlessly, "is actually your half-brother, born of your mother's legitimate marriage, arranged after her mistake. He is the true Matsudaya heir. You are, and have always been, a well-treated foundling." The formal expulsion came 3 days later, delivered with the cold efficiency of a business transaction. Kenjin was provided with a modest sum of money, traveling papers identifying him as a merchant's assistant, and the clothes on his back. No further explanation was offered. No appeal was permitted. As he walked through the compound's gates for the final time, Kenji turned for one last look at the only home he had ever known. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard, where he had learned to walk, to read, to dream of a future that had never been his to claim. The servants who had raised him stood silently in the courtyard, their faces carefully neutral, professional. But he caught the eye of old Tanaka, the gardener who had taught him to appreciate the subtle beauty of cherry blossoms, and saw tears streaming down the weathered face. "Young master," Tanaka whispered as Kenji passed, "remember that a man's worth is not determined by the family that claims him, but by the honor he creates with his own hands." Edo streets had never seemed so vast or unforgiving. Without the protective mantle of family status, Kenji discovered the harsh realities faced by those without connections or guaranteed position. The rigid social hierarchy that he had studied as an abstract concept became a daily obstacle course of survival and dignity. He found lodging in a cramped boarding house in the Yoshiwara district, where merchants, artisans, and entertainers lived in close quarters, their lives governed by the immediate demands of commerce, rather than the long-term strategies of inherited wealth. His refined mannerisms and educated speech marked him as different, earning suspicion from some and exploitation from others. Yet within this world of temporal pleasures and commercial necessities, Kenji began to discover aspects of Japanese society that his sheltered upbringing had never revealed. The floating world, ukiyo, was not merely the realm of courtesans and kabuki actors that Confucian moralists condemned, but a vibrant ecosystem where creativity, merit, and personal charm could triumph over birth and social status. The art of reinvention. Survival required adaptation. Kenji's classical education, initially seeming useless in this practical world, gradually became his greatest asset. His beautiful calligraphy attracted the attention of publishers, producing the popular woodblock prints and illustrated books that fed Edo's growing appetite for entertainment and information. Working for a Yamamoto-san, a shrewd publisher who specialized in tales of love and adventure, Kenji learned the commercial side of art and literature. He discovered that his aristocratic perspective, combined with newfound understanding of common struggles, enabled him to create stories that resonated with both educated and popular audiences. The work was demanding but liberating. For the first time in his life, Kenji's value was determined by his abilities rather than his bloodline. His stories, tales of forbidden love, honor among outcasts, and the redemptive power of personal transformation began to attract a devoted readership throughout Edo. Chapter 4. The Encounters That Changed Everything. A chance meeting in cherry blossom season. 6 months after his exile, as spring painted Edo in delicate pastels, Kenji encountered the person who would transform his understanding of love, honor, and redemption. He was at Ueno Hill, sketching cherry blossoms for a new publication, when he heard a familiar laugh that stopped his heart. Yuki Watanabe stood beneath the flowering trees, her beauty enhanced rather than diminished by the simple blue kimono she wore. But she was not alone. Beside her stood a young man Kenji recognized with painful clarity, his half-brother, Ichiro, the true Matsudaira heir. Their eyes met across the crowded park, and in that moment, Kenji saw something that shattered all his assumptions about the woman he had believed himself destined to marry. Yuki's expression was not one of happiness or romantic fulfillment, but of profound sadness and resignation. The weight of duty and desire. That evening, as lanterns began to twinkle throughout the city, Yuki appeared at Kenji's modest lodging. The proprietors, scandalized by the arrival of such an obviously refined young lady, showed her to his small room with barely concealed curiosity. "I had to see you," she said simply, kneeling gracefully on the worn tatami mats. "To explain, to apologize, to understand what happened to the man I believed I would spend my life beside." Kenji served tea with hands that trembled slightly, the ritual providing structure for emotions too complex for immediate expression. "There is nothing to apologize for, Yuki-san. You have followed the path of duty, as is proper." "Proper," she repeated with bitter emphasis. "Do you know what I have learned about propriety in these months since your disappearance? I have learned that it is often the enemy of truth, the prison of the heart, the excuse used by those with power to sacrifice those without it. The revelation of mutual suffering." As the night deepened around them, Yuki revealed the full extent of the manipulation that had governed both their lives. She had been informed of Kenji's disgraceful behavior and ungrateful abandonment of family duty. Simultaneously, she had been pressured into accepting the engagement with Ichiro through a combination of family financial pressures and social expectations. "But I discovered the truth," she continued, her voice steady despite the pain evident in her eyes. "My father's business has been struggling, and our family needed the Matsudaira connection. I am not choosing Ichiro for love, but as payment for debts and social advancement." The cruel irony was complete. Both Kenji and Yuki were victims of the same system that prioritized social stability over individual happiness, economic advantage over emotional authenticity. "And Ichiro?" Kenji asked, dreading the answer. "He is a kind young man who deserves a wife who can love him freely," Yuki replied. "Instead, he will receive a woman whose heart belongs to someone deemed unsuitable by circumstances beyond anyone's control." Chapter 5. The Design of Subtle Revenge. The Artist's Expanding Influence. As the seasons turned, Kenji's reputation as a storyteller and artist grew throughout Edo. His tales, published under the pen name of Tozai, Eastern West, captured the imagination of readers across all social classes. Merchants read his stories of commercial honor. Samurai appreciated his understanding of duty and sacrifice. And common people found hope in his narratives of personal transformation. More significantly, his work began to attract attention from unexpected quarters. Several daimyo, including some with connections to the Tokugawa administration, commissioned private works, family histories, artistic projects, and cultural documentation that required both artistic skill and discretion. Through these commissions, Kenji gained access to the complex networks of influence that truly governed Edo society. He learned that power flowed not merely through official hierarchies, but through informal relationships, shared interests, and mutual obligations that transcended class boundaries. The network of artistic rebellion. Within Edo's creative community, Kenji found kindred spirits who shared his complex relationship with traditional authority, poets whose work challenged conventional thinking, artists whose paintings revealed social truths, and publishers who walked the delicate line between entertainment and social commentary. Bunzo became both mentor and collaborator, teaching Kenji that true power in the Edo period often belonged to those who could shape public opinion and cultural trends. The samurai may carry swords, Bunzo observed during one of their evening discussions, but we artists carry something more powerful, the ability to change how people think about the world around them. Under Bunzo's guidance, Kenji began to understand how his personal story of betrayal and exile could become a lens through which to examine larger social issues, the tension between individual desire and collective responsibility, the cost of rigid social hierarchies, and the possibility of creating new forms of honor and dignity. A plan born of patience and wisdom. Rather than seeking direct confrontation with the Matsudaira family, Kenji embarked on a more subtle campaign. He began to weave elements of his own experience into stories that, while fictional, illuminated the human cost of treating people as mere instruments of family ambition. His tale, The Merchant's Daughter, told of a young woman forced into marriage to save her family's finances, exploring the psychological toll of such arrangements. The False Son examined the identity crisis of a young man who discovers his entire understanding of family and belonging was built on deception. These stories, while not explicitly referencing the Matsudaira, were recognized by those familiar with Edo's gossip networks as pointed commentary on real social situations. They generated discussion, debate, and gradual shifts in how people thought about family duty, individual rights, and the morality of treating human relationships as business transactions. Chapter 6: The Convergence of Fate and Design, the Festival of Transformations. The opportunity for direct action came during the Sanja Matsuri, one of Edo's most spectacular festivals, when normal social boundaries dissolved in celebration and the entire city became a stage for dramatic encounters. The festival's 3-day celebration honored the founding spirits of Edo's prosperity, making it a perfect moment for personal reckonings with the past. Kenji had been commissioned to document the festival for a wealthy patron, giving him access to exclusive celebrations throughout the city. It was during the second day's proceedings that he learned of a special ceremony to be held at the Matsudaira compound, a formal announcement of Ichiro and Yuki's engagement, timed to coincide with the festival's themes of new beginnings and continued prosperity. The Unexpected Alliance. The night before the ceremony, Kenji received an unexpected visitor, Ichiro himself, appearing at his lodging alone and clearly distressed. The young man, who was technically his half-brother, bore a little physical resemblance to Kenji, but shared the same intelligent eyes and thoughtful demeanor. "I know who you are," Ichiro said without preamble, settling onto the floor with obvious exhaustion. "I have always known, and I need your help to prevent a terrible mistake." Their conversation revealed that Ichiro, far from being a willing participant in the family's machinations, was himself a victim of Toshiko's controlling nature. He had discovered the truth about Kenji's parentage and exile, and, more importantly, he had recognized Yuki's profound unhappiness with their arranged engagement. "I cannot marry a woman who loves another man," Ichiro said with quiet dignity. "It would be dishonorable to her, to you, and ultimately to myself. But I also cannot directly defy grandmother without destroying my mother's position in the family." Together, the two young men, both victims of the same system in different ways, designed a plan that would expose the moral bankruptcy of their situation while providing everyone with a path to dignity and redemption. Kenji would attend the engagement ceremony as a commissioned artist, documenting the event for posterity. At the moment of formal announcement, he would present a gift to the family, a specially created scroll containing a story that paralleled their own situation so precisely that denial would be impossible. Ichido, meanwhile, would use the public nature of the ceremony to declare his recognition of Kenji's true place in the family and his own unwillingness to benefit from injustice. The public setting would make it impossible for Toshiko to suppress the truth without losing face, while the festival atmosphere would provide cover for dramatic revelations. The role of artistic truth. Chapter 7. The Ceremony of Revelations. The stage set for truth. The Matsudaira compound had been transformed for the engagement ceremony. Paper lanterns cast warm light across gardens, temporarily reconfigured to accommodate over 200 guests, including representatives from major merchant families, lower-ranking samurai, and various cultural figures whose presence lent prestige to the occasion. Kenji arrived in the formal dress of a commissioned artist. His status as documentarian provided both access and relative anonymity. As he moved through the crowds, sketching scenes and noting details, he observed the complex social dynamics at play. The careful positioning of families according to wealth and influence, the subtle negotiations occurring behind fans and polite conversation, the way power manifested itself through seemingly casual interactions. Yuki appeared radiant in the formal kimono appropriate for such an occasion, but Kenji could see the strain in her eyes, the careful control required to maintain proper demeanor while her heart was breaking. Ichiro, standing beside his grandmother as the designated heir, wore the expression of a man preparing for battle rather than celebration. The moment of convergence. The formal ceremony began with traditional elements, purification rituals, offerings to ancestral spirits, and speeches honoring the family's histories and bright futures. Toshiko, magnificent in her formal robes and jewelry, commanded the gathering with the presence of a born leader, her words weaving together commercial success and family tradition in a narrative that justified all her choices. It was during her speech about the importance of preserving family lines through appropriate marriages that Kenji made his move. Rising from his position among the artists and servants, he approached the ceremonial area with the confident bearing of someone acting with proper authority. "Honored Matsudaira-sama," he announced in a voice that carried clearly across the suddenly silent gathering. "I have prepared a special commemorative work for this auspicious occasion. With your permission, I would like to present The Tale of Two Heirs as a gift to celebrate the wisdom and justice for which your family is renowned." The unveiling of truth. Toshiko, caught in the social obligation to graciously accept such a publicly offered gift, could not refuse without appearing ungracious before her assembled guests. She nodded regally, gesturing for Kenji to proceed. As he unrolled the scroll and began to read the story aloud, the parallels to their own situation became impossible to ignore. Guests exchanged meaningful glances, recognizing the real-life figures behind the fictional characters. The story's themes of hidden parentage, unjust exile, and the triumph of moral courage over social convenience resonated with powerful clarity. But the story's conclusion provided something unprecedented, a vision of how such situations could be resolved through recognition of shared values rather than rigid adherence to social forms. The tale's wise matriarch, ultimately recognized that true family honor came from embracing justice rather than maintaining comfortable fictions. Ichiro's moment of courage. As Kenji finished reading, Ichiro stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Grandmother, honored guests, I must speak honestly about what we have witnessed here today. This story is not mere fiction, but a mirror held up to our own family's recent history. The young man's formal acknowledgement of Kenji as his half-brother, his public recognition of the injustice in his exile, and his declaration that he could not accept benefits derived from such treatment created a social situation that demanded response. Toshipo found herself facing the choice between public humiliation and public redemption. Chapter 8: The Resolution of Honor. A grandmother's moment of truth. The silence that followed Ichiro's declaration seemed to stretch across eternity. 200 guests watched as Toshiko, the formidable matriarch who had built a commercial empire through calculated decisions, faced the most important choice of her life. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years and the wisdom that comes from recognizing one's own mistakes. In my determination to protect this family's future, I lost sight of its heart, she admitted, her words clear and strong despite their cost. I allowed fear of change to blind me to the true character of those I was meant to nurture. She turned to face Kenji directly, and in that moment, he saw not the calculating businesswoman who had exiled him, but the grandmother who had once taught him calligraphy and shared stories of their ancestors' courage. Kenji-kun, your blood may be mixed, but your heart has proven itself pure. You have used your exile to become the man I always hoped you could be, while I used my power to become someone I no longer recognize. The transformation of understanding. The public acknowledgement of error from such a powerful figure created space for broader reconciliation. Yuki, given permission by changing circumstances to speak her own truth, addressed the gathering with quiet dignity. I am deeply honored by the Matsudaira family's trust in considering me worthy of marriage to Ichiro-san, she said, her words carefully chosen to preserve everyone's dignity. However, I believe that true honor in marriage comes from the joining of freely given hearts rather than the fulfillment of social obligations. Her gentle but clear indication that she could not proceed with the arranged marriage, delivered in language that emphasized respect rather than rejection, provided Ichiro with the opening he needed to demonstrate his own character. Yuki-san's wisdom reminds us all that the highest form of respect we can show another person is to see them as they truly are, rather than as we need them to be, Ichiro responded. I believe our family's honor is best served by supporting authentic connections rather than convenient arrangements. The emergence of new possibilities. What followed was unprecedented in Edo period social dynamics, a public renegotiation of family relationships that prioritized character over convention. Toshiko formally acknowledged Kenji as a Matsudaira heir, while clarifying that the family was fortunate to have two worthy successors with different strengths and interests. The engagement between Ichiro and Yuki was gracefully dissolved, with both families agreeing that forced marriages served no one's interests. Instead, Toshiko announced that the celebration would honor new forms of family connection: adoption based on merit, marriages based on affection, and business partnerships founded on shared values rather than mere financial advantage. A love validated. As the formal ceremonies concluded and guests began to mingle in the transformed social atmosphere, Kenji and Yuki found themselves together in the garden where they had once dreamed of a shared future. The months of separation, pain, and uncertainty had not diminished their connection, but had deepened it, adding layers of understanding and appreciation for what they had nearly lost. "Can we truly build a life together now?" Yuki asked, her voice soft with wonder at the unexpected turn of events. "We can build something better than what we dreamed before," Kenji replied, taking her hand with gentle reverence. "We can create a partnership between two people who have learned the difference between duty and love, between social expectation and personal truth." Epilogue: The Legacy of Transformation. 5 years later, the Matsudaira Renaissance. In the autumn of Kenji and Yuki's 5th wedding anniversary, the Matsudaira compound had become one of Edo's most interesting cultural centers. Under the combined leadership of Toshiko's business acumen, Ichiro's administrative skills, and Kenji's artistic vision, the family had pioneered new forms of social organization that balanced tradition with innovation. The compound regularly hosted gatherings where artists, merchants, and scholars engaged in discussions that challenged conventional thinking while respecting cultural foundations. Kenji's publishing ventures had expanded to include works by other writers and artists whose perspectives had been marginalized by traditional systems, creating new spaces for creative expression and social commentary. Ichiro had found his calling in social reform, working within the existing system to create opportunities for capable individuals regardless of birth circumstances. His marriage to a merchant's daughter, a love match that had developed naturally through shared interests, had become a model for other families considering alternatives to purely strategic arrangements. The wisdom of shared stories. Toshiko, now approaching 80, had become something of a legend in Edo's commercial districts. Her transformation from rigid traditionalist to innovative thinker demonstrated that personal growth was possible at any stage of life. She frequently told visitors that her greatest business success had been learning to invest in people's potential rather than merely their credentials. Personal reflections on historical lessons. The tale of Kenji, Yuki, and the Matsudaira family offers profound insights into the challenges faced by individuals living within rigid social systems, whether in 18th century Japan or contemporary societies worldwide. Their story demonstrates that meaningful change often requires both personal courage and collective wisdom, individual transformation, and social innovation. During the Edo period, Japan experienced unprecedented urban growth, commercial development, and cultural flowering precisely because creative individuals found ways to work within traditional structures while gradually expanding possibilities for human expression and connection. The period's greatest achievements came not from abandoning all traditional values, but from applying those values, honor, loyalty, respect, and responsibility, in ways that served human flourishing rather than mere social control. Contemporary relevance. Modern readers might recognize parallels between the social pressures faced by Kenji and Yuki and contemporary challenges around family expectations, career choices, and authentic relationships. The story suggests that resolution of such conflicts often requires not choosing between tradition and innovation, but finding ways to honor the deeper values underlying traditional forms while creating space for new expressions of those values. The Matsudaira family's transformation illustrates that sustainable social change often comes through patient engagement with existing systems rather than dramatic rejection of all established structures. By working within cultural frameworks while gradually expanding their possibilities, individuals can create meaningful transformation that benefits everyone involved. The continuing story. As this narrative concludes, it's worth noting that the Edo period continued for another century and a half after our story's events, eventually culminating in the Meiji Restoration that would transform Japan from a feudal society into a modern nation-state. The social innovations pioneered by families like the fictional Matsudaira, emphasis on merit over birth, recognition of individual dignity, and integration of creative perspectives into decision-making would become crucial elements in Japan's eventual modernization. The personal transformations experienced by Kenji, Yuki, Ichiro, and Toshiko represent microcosms of the larger cultural evolution that characterized this remarkable period in Japanese history. Their story reminds us that historical change happens not through abstract forces, but through the accumulated choices of individuals who choose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and love over mere social obligation. In sharing this tale of exile, redemption, and transformation, we honor both the specific cultural context of Edo period Japan and the universal human experiences of belonging, rejection, growth, and the ultimate triumph of authentic connection over artificial barriers. Their legacy continues to inspire anyone facing the challenge of remaining true to personal values while navigating complex social expectations.